Harrison Price for Tuesday, December 31st, New Year's Eve, 2024, coming to you from the Nation Network studio built by Arbor Lee here at the historic Wall Center, and the show a presentation of Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION when opening that account. Matt Sakaris alongside Jeff Paterson, sitting in for Blake Price today. Four-time Juno Award winner Mike Rogerson hitting switches, conducting things for the final show of 2024. Jeff, can you believe we are a quarter of the way through this 21st century?
Was thinking about that earlier, that we rang in the millennium at a house party, a good buddy of mine. Like, how could it be 25 years ago? Like, I remember the party.
Y2K was going to get us.
Yeah, I remember parts of the party. Yeah, I mean, time does march on. They say time moves along when you're having fun. I don't know. I guess are we all having fun? I hope so. But I'm a little reflective today. I'll admit that.
Yeah, ditto.
Just sort of recounting the last 12 months.
I actually can't remember where I spent New Year's Eve 2000, which probably means it was a pretty good party. And Y2K didn't get us. But yeah, final show here, final day of 2024. Hope everybody has a happy and safe New Year's. Enjoys the Canucks and Flames tonight. The best New Year's party will be with this guy on Rink-Wide Vancouver minutes after the final horn. And, of course, a stat holiday tomorrow, and then the Canucks off to Seattle for Thursday. Our next show will be Friday here on Sakaris and Price. Blake will be back from the Spengler Cup. We'll be looking forward to that Nashville game and unpacking both the Kraken game and this one tonight against the rival Calgary Flames. Let's get to our Surrey Mitsubishi poll question. Do you believe the Canucks would choose JT Miller over Elias Pettersson? You can vote yes, you can vote no. Do so, at the Sakaris and Price X and YouTube channels. This, of course, after the explosive comments from General Manager Patrik Allvin yesterday. We'll unpack those comments in a moment, Jeff, but first, give me your answer on the poll.
I think Rick Tocchet would probably side with JT Miller. I think Miller just profiles more as the kind of player Tocchet was, the kind of player that Tocchet wishes he had a few more of on his roster here. And we know that there's been some frustration and a little bit of friction at times between the coach and the player. Organizationally, I still think you would look at the 25-year-old 100-point guy who has been there and done it. Now, he didn't do it in the playoffs, obviously, and he hasn't been doing much of it this year. But they committed to him in the spring. I mean, that was all part of this calendar year as well. It feels like a lifetime ago. Organizationally, I think they probably would still be on Pettersson's side, but we know, and obviously Allvin left no stone unturned with his comments, that it's go time, and it's been go time for a while, and yet he's still not going.
Yeah. You voted Pettersson then?
I think so.
Yeah, I voted Miller. I think when Jim Rutherford got here, I think one of the big decisions he knew he had to make was whether or not he felt Elias Pettersson could be a core player on a Stanley Cup champion. I think over the intervening years, JT Miller has won the organization over. And look, I don't think they're thrilled with everything JT Miller. I think sometimes the emotions get the best of him. Sometimes the lack of focus on the ice, the defensive miscues get him. But I do believe they think him a better playoff performer. I do believe they think him a better leader. And I think the comments from Allvin yesterday to Ian McIntyre of Sportsnet were quite telling. I think it has been an organizational frustration that they just can't reach the young man. He has not proved particularly coachable. He's a very mercurial personality. I think he just wants to be left alone, and that's not necessarily their way of doing things. I agree wholeheartedly with what you said about Rick Tocchet and JT Miller. And I do think that push is coming to shove here because there has been, we thought a couple of weeks ago when Allvin said what he said to Peach last week, to Patrick Johnston, followed by what Rick Tocchet and Quinn Hughes had to say, we thought that would sort of be the, okay, gauntlet down, last stand, last straw. And then Allvin goes and says what he says yesterday to McIntyre, which is just further piling on here in terms of, Elias, it's time to produce or it's time to move on. Surrey Mitsubishi, it's lease month. And leasing a car, often a better way to go. Lower monthly payments, flexibility to drive a new vehicle, minimal maintenance cost, plus you avoid the long-term ownership and depreciation of the vehicle. This month at Surrey Mitsubishi, you get the Outlander PHEV, the 2024, for $182 a week. The gas option there's $105 a week. The Eclipse Cross is just $100 a week. And the RVR, only $87 a week. Plus, skate away with up to $1,000 winter tire credit and no charge to your maintenance package. And for those of you interested in a hybrid vehicle, the Outlander PHEV, that $5,000 government rebate. Get it while it lasts. All leases are OAC. Surrey Mitsubishi, 13820 104th Avenue in Surrey, or online at surreymitsubishi.ca. As we get into our top story, brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Foolish Winery. A not so happy new year for or from Patrik Allvin. The Canucks GM lambasts the team to IMAX as anyone is tradable. We talked yesterday about how this has been a different season for the Canucks, Jeff. Well, the GM sounds like it has been a difficult season for him and management. Nobody escapes his criticism here. And rather than run from the Miller-Pettersson rift and Elias' struggles, management is leaning in. It's like the Canucks version of the Hunger Games going on here.
Well, a couple of things jump to mind immediately. Look, people like to point the finger at us, not you and me, but, well, maybe you and me, but the collective we, the media,
we get
for
it.
talking trades, right? And look, we follow this team. We're looking for storylines, absolutely. But when the president goes on after hours on the national broadcaster a month ago and says, we need a couple of players, and we know Jim Rutherford's track record, well, how are you going to get those players? It's through trade. Then a month later, not even a month later, the general manager comes out in this year-end question and answer and says, exactly as you just pointed out, anybody, and maybe everybody, is tradable.
There were a couple of questions there where there are easy exit ramps, and Patrik Allvin just stoutly refuses to take them.
Right, so this isn't far-fetched that it's an underperforming team, it's underperforming individuals, it's one guy with this massive contract that was a no-show in the playoffs. Now, he can't do anything about that until they get back to the playoffs. And another player who has stepped aside, taken a personal leave, come back, hasn't looked anything like the player that got to 103 points and was the heart and soul of this hockey club last season. So, on ice, off ice, things just aren't going the way that this organization had hoped for. And, yeah, I mean, you see comments like this and you get a sense that patience is running thin with the star players, but also just the overall performance of this group. I mean, look, you get to the second round of Game 7, a second round last year, of course expectations are going to be through the roof. You go out, you spend money in the offseason, you come back, you think you've improved your roster, and yet through all of that, I mean, from the summertime on, Matt, we all screamed that this team needed to address the defense core. And
we're going to get to that, Jeff, because management has a role here too.
For sure.
Management can look in the mirror here on several fronts. But first, the Allvin comments on Pettersson, and I quote, Petey has shown up to this point that he is an extremely talented, quality player that could and should be a number one centerman. That was my first highlight here. Could and should be, meaning he isn't, and we think he should be. So underachieving, the word that applies there. Now, some sugar. I believe in him. I believe that he's capable. And then this hammer drop. He needs to mature and understand that there are certain expectations and it does not get easier. And you need to face the music when things don't go well. Is, brackets, a trade possible? I guess I would say that anything is possible. Let's unpack. Could and should be a number one center. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
He was the first half of last year, though.
Sure.
Like that's so we're speaking to regression here. He needs to mature. So let me just ask you this, Jeff, because I think you're closer to it. Gaming, video gaming, a distinct style of fashion that leans more youthful, less conventional, and the NHL does judge books by its cover, folks. A scooter around town. Do you think Canucks management looks at that and goes, this is just an immature kid who needs to grow up? Do you think they judge the things in his personal life as immaturity and draw the line to underperformance on the ice?
I don't. I don't. Because he was doing all the same things and he was putting up 102 points and nobody said a word. I think, and look, the sentence, he needs to mature. I mean, yeah, we're talking about a guy that's now 25 and is woefully underperforming and nothing seems to be changing. And I think that's part of the issue. I think this is more about the way that he has responded to external criticism but possibly internal
as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So
can we lay to rest the notion that he's his own worst critic now?
Yeah, I think so.
Because he says that all the time, and yet I wasn't sure I believed it the first time, and I sure as hell don't believe it now.
No, I think that's fair. I think it's the way that he carries himself. I think it's body language. I think it's the way that that interview ended.
The flippant answers.
Sort of muttering under his breath as he handles some of the questions that he doesn't like. Like,
oh my God, is that still a thing? Oh my God,
woe is me.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Like, if I could say one thing to Elias, just, son, you're not aggrieved. Like,
and certainly not on the 15th and 31st of each month.
No. Well, we don't know what he's got going on in his personal life, and if there's something there that is driving all this, I'll go back to and look. This is not an apples to apples comparison. I'm the first to acknowledge that. But when the Canucks traded for Lyndon Vay, you remember that, Jeff?
I do.
And Willie had him in Medicine Hat. He looked like a forward who wasn't going to get an opportunity in L.A., if I'm not mistaken, right? But seemed like he, had an NHL future, and the Canucks brought him in and thought it was a pretty good addition, right? Like, here's a young forward with some upside. And he didn't produce here, and we're like, oh my God, this Lyndon Vay, what is with him? And then we found out, that his parents were involved in, a murder plot and facing the criminal justice system. And it was like, of course, the situation wasn't set up trying to perform in that sort of environment. Like, if Patterson has something massive going on in his personal life that we're unaware of,
some distance between the Lyndon Vay story and Elias Pettersson.
Needless to say, nothing like that. You wouldn't think. But if there's something just massive going on in his life that we're unaware of, then fair enough. And if he doesn't want to reveal it and is just willing to take all the slings and arrows, again. But fair enough. But barring something like that, I can't understand the walking around as aggrieved and the interviews as aggrieved as they are with this guy, which gets me to, you need to face the music when things don't go well. It sounds to me like there's an accountability problem there.
Yeah,
Jeff.
I think that's fair.
And it also sounds to me like management doesn't like the fact that when things aren't going well for other players, Jake DeBrusk, goalless in 10, JT Miller, what have you, they're out there answering all the questions and taking responsibility, whereas Elias is loath to do so. Fair?
Yeah, and again, I think the fans won't give a shit if a guy doesn't come out and do media if he's putting up 102 points.
Correct.
But that's not happening and hasn't for a long time now. And so things have changed and things have to change. And it's pretty clear that it's not just us that feel that.
JT got benched in the Nashville game in November. It was a public shaming for a proud guy. Through his struggles, there weren't a lot of significant benchings of Elias. Tocchet has handled him differently than Miller. In retrospect, should there have been something a little harsher, a little more public earlier? Do you think that might have helped things? Do you think that might have quelled the storm with him and JT?
It's possible. There's got to be accountability at some level, even for your star players. And I get that through the playoffs, they needed Elias Pettersson, and they had to believe that the next game was going to be the game that he broke out, right? Like, you're not going to diminish his ice time in the playoffs. You have to think that at some point you're going to see flashes of the guy that was this team's scoring leader. Didn't happen in the playoffs. And then I think the entire organization, like, there had to be guys in that locker room that looked across and thought, like, we're down a goal. We need something from you, and it's just not there. And you think of the comebacks, and they were often led by JT Miller. It was Brock Boeser. And there was just nothing. There wasn't a peep from Elias Pettersson through the playoffs. And then we had the knee tendonitis thing. But I think everybody wanted to believe, okay, scatter for the summer, go your separate ways, reconvene at training camp, and it's got to be better. And it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I can understand from management's point, you commit to this guy with all the money and all the term. This season starts poorly. Teammates thinking, we just went through this from the last half of last season. Like, you know that there's more there. Like, when are we going to start to see it? So, yeah, I mean, I think there has to be some degree of accountability, and whether it's a public flogging, a benching like that, just reducing ice time, whatever the case, it did sort of feel like he was treated with kid gloves, and there was way too much patience shown to this player.
More Allvin, quote, I think, again, it comes back to expectations and preparation, how you prepare yourself. I don't believe that he was aware of just how hard it was going to be, just because you achieve one thing to get a long-term extension. And then he goes on, life gets harder. When he reported for training camp, Jeff, and was asked, how did your summer go? How did your knee go? And he went, oh, well, it prevented me from doing some things, but that's okay because I've got stronger in other areas. That was a bit of a red flag to me. Do you think the work ethic just isn't there away from the ice, and that there's too much relying on the talent, and it is majestic talent? It's hard to draw any other
you're right.
conclusion when the GM says that, because he hasn't. This isn't the first time we have talked about preparation with Elias.
Right, and you watch him on the ice, he still gets knocked off his feet way too often.
He's just got to get stronger. It's that simple.
But we've been saying that for a while, but through that, he was able to perform at an incredibly elite level, so he's done it before. And he's got to find a way to do it again. It's in there. Like, he hasn't forgotten how to play hockey or to produce. But you do wonder when you hear these things from the coach, when you see JT Miller challenging him on the ice at practice as he did that day in October. Like, all of these guys are trying to find ways to get their message through. Find a button
to push.
Right.
You know, like,
and I think that's the frustration. As you said, it's the players, it's the coach, now it's management, and nobody seems to be able to reach this guy, and yet nothing's changing in his on-ice performance.
I'm just sitting here looking at my laptop. We've exhausted QWERTY in every letter. We're through the numbers. How many special keys are we going to have to hit before we get the one that motivates Pettersson?
And so we don't know what goes on behind the scenes in terms of, is he the first guy in the gym? Is he the last guy in the gym? Is he putting in the work off the ice that is required of elite level athletes?
Yeah.
And I just don't know that. But again, this frustration is coming from somewhere.
Yeah. And look, just before anyone thinks Allvin is piling on to Pettersson, no.
He was just getting warmed up.
Yes, he sure was. On his stars, quote, I think it's fair to say that you expect your best players to be difference makers and the best players when you need them. And unfortunately, I think we haven't got the most out of those specific guys.
That's fair.
Now, that's not Quinn Hughes. That's the other guy. That's number 9.
Yep.
And unless anyone think this show is piling on Pettersson, JT has to be way better. Way better. I said on yesterday's program, if Hughes is out for the next 10 games, I want to see 15 points from JT Miller. I want to see him be above a point per game to drag that average up and get back to looking like the player he was over the last few seasons here in Vancouver. Not to mention, I want to see him play the tough matchups, which he's going to get now with no Elias Pettersson and a bit of a neutered Vancouver lineup, especially on the road, you've got to win those matchups too. Like it can't be the JT Miller of way long ago where the points were there, but the defensive effort and the defensive detail wasn't. He's got to be that 200-foot centerman that is driving offense and holding his own defensively over the next month.
So it just times out that they're playing Calgary, of all teams. Think back to opening night, Matt. The thunderous hit on Kevin Rooney. The fight that comes with it.
Yep.
And then they're down a goal, and who do they turn? It's JT Miller that gets the game to overtime for them. Like,
that's the sort of performance
outside of his overtime winner in Florida, like those are the two performances this year that stand out. We're bumping up against the midway mark of this season.
Well, so first of all, it's the volume, only 2. And secondly, when was that Florida game?
October, the 5th game of the season or something. Yeah.
Or game 37?
Yeah. And I know he missed 10, but he's played 27.
Yeah. On trades, Allvin, quote, "Do I want to see if I could shake things up and send a message to the players? Sometimes that is what's needed." Is he laying the groundwork for a big trade so that it is not a big surprise to either his room or his customers?
And I mean, again, Rutherford referenced it on After Hours. We know Jim Rutherford's history. The fact that we're going to get to January 1st and there hasn't been a transaction, like I'm surprised. I think a lot of people that have followed Jim Rutherford and this hockey club would be surprised that there hasn't been any roster transactions from the Vancouver Canucks the way there were last year.
So, especially with more cap space to work with this year.
Is it the big trade of one of these two that we keep talking about, or just addressing the issues on the back end independently? One or both? Sure. But I think he is sort of laying the groundwork here to finally pull the trigger on a trade.
Boeser's been decent. Boeser's been good. But boy, does Patrik Allvin hold Brock Boeser to a high standard. You may remember in the summer when he was asked about Boeser's 40-goal season, and he said, could have been 50 if he didn't take his foot off the gas. Thought he coasted for a bit. Well, IMAC asked him about Boeser. The response, "I would have him in the same boat as Petey and Miller in terms of giving us more when we need more. There is more to give." Absolutely. We discussed a little bit yesterday, Jeff. I'm just not sure Boeser is their guy.
No.
I'm just not sure that Boeser is going to be re-signed here unless Brock Boeser signs a team-friendly contract that the Vancouver Canucks have put before him.
And even then, I mean, 28-year-old forwards with a 40-goal season on their resume, they can command. Like, he'd get paid on the market.
No question. And if Brock's looking at it and goes, I can make like $1.5 million more over 7 years, so $10 million more somewhere else.
See ya.
I would not begrudge him in the least.
Right. And so, again, like, there's two sides to this. Canucks can put their offer on the table, but Boeser gets a say in all of this as well. My hunch, and this is all it is that they need Brock Boeser in the here and now for the remainder of this season. I think the cap space that they would gain from Brock Boeser's departure is the key in all of this. That you keep Brock Boeser through the playoffs. If you get there, you hope that he performs the way that he did last year in the postseason. And then I guess I'm bracing for a guy who's played 500 games as a Vancouver Canuck and only as a Vancouver Canuck to walk this summer. Like I don't see them trading him before the deadline.
No, because you're trying to compete in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and unless you can get a like-for-like trade there, I'm with you, Jeff. But get a good look at him, everybody, because I think number 6 is playing his last 50 or so games here in a Canucks uniform, and I think it's also fair to say one of the most beloved Vancouver Canucks ever.
Yeah. Like, people took a shine to this guy early on, as they should. Scored in his debut, has scored a bunch of goals. Last year, obviously, finally reached that 30 goal and got to 40. The playoff performance, all the off-ice hardship that he has dealt with and taken on head-on. A likable guy. He's been a terrific Canuck for a long time.
He really has. And
But
he has
where are
shared
the
his
days?
life and his family's life with us. We feel like we've gotten to know him.
Absolutely. He's growing up in front of our eyes here.
Exactly. And that deepens the connection, that deepens the respect, the love, all of that.
But it's
Allvin's in the
$6.65 million that you can spend.
That's right.
Younger, faster.
And Allvin is in the business of having to make difficult decisions. Now, lest you thought he stopped there, and look, this wasn't a gauntlet by any stretch, but we have heard mostly reverence from Patrik Allvin towards Rick Tocchet. Is that fair to say, Jeff?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like we all sat here coming up on 2 years ago now and went, what is it about Tocchet? Like a 2-time failed head coach in Arizona and Tampa Bay. Like, why are these guys like thinking him, treating him, talking about him like he's Scotty Bowman or something like that? It's been mostly reverence for Rick Tocchet from this general manager who, needless to say, really liked what he saw when Tocchet was an assistant in Pittsburgh. Well, Allvin now saying it's Tocchet's job to get the team playing more consistently. And he mentioned the game that we all fixated on, Jeff. You get a fantastic win against the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers here at home. You shut them out. You get a fantastic win a few days later against the Colorado Avalanche, maybe the best defensive performance the Canucks have put up all season. Kiefer Sherwood with the hat trick. And in between, you have an absolute no-show on a Saturday Hockey Night in Canada game against Brad Marchand and the Boston Bruins. And Allvin said he doesn't like driving to the rink not knowing what he's getting.
Well, he's not alone
and
there.
There's 18,000 people, and many of them season ticket members, who agree with you, Patrick.
He gets in for free.
That's right. I think it's too harsh to say that Rick Tocchet is on notice. But was this the first shot across Tocchet's bow from management?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I'd have to go back and parse all the comments. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, you're right. They have sort of pointed to him being their guy and all the hard work that goes in behind the scenes and all the work at practices. And interesting that the last couple of practices I was at here since Christmas, both Rutherford and Allvin, 10 rows up in the lower bowl, watching intently. We know how much they like their practice habits.
So let me ask you this, because it's been a while since I've been covering practices. There were some teams when the GM was just in the stands every single practice, or most practices. What have Rutherford and Allvin's attendance records been for practice? Like, how unusual is it to see them watching a practice?
Not highly unusual, but it's not an everyday occurrence. There is quite often.
So they miss more practices than they attend.
Yeah, okay. I think it sort of their attendance dovetails with the ebbs and flows of the season. And so when things are kind of sputtering along, you're more likely to see them. There's generally somebody from the front office, like Emily Castingay is there and watching practices, Cammy there as well from time to time. But yeah, I think it's been a little more frequent in the last month perhaps than it was in the early going this season. Again, when they, against all odds, sort of given who was missing from their lineup, they were able to get out of the gates to a relatively successful start, but it's been a little rockier here of late, and so have seen them more frequently at practices in the last month or so.
Got to tell you about Mr. Fox's fantastic box. Yellow Dog Brewing, the Jeff O'Neill Show, and the world-famous Sea Fox teaming up to give you the greatest gift here of the holiday season. Mr. Fox's fantastic box, a new mix pack containing a brand-new collaboration beer and an old favorite making its return. Jingle Juice Tangerine Blonde Ale. And are you ready for it, Mike? Fa la 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 lager. Had to get that one more time in here during the holiday season. We'll keep you refreshed and we'll make you wish the festivities were lasting just a little bit longer. You can get Mr. Fox's fantastic box at government and private liquor stores. Our friend Rob Williams with a tweet earlier in the week that I want to read just because I want to illustrate how much further Allvin has gone here and also dovetail now into a conversation of their responsibility, Jeff. But Rob Williams, the Daily Hive, and Offside, Most interesting part of this Miller-Pettersson drama has been Tocchet's role in it. He split them up on the power play, which made it impossible to ignore. Then he called out the media for not requesting to speak to both of them, almost like he wanted to shine a light on it. Well, he shined a mag light on it. I mean, Patrik Allvin here has shined a spotlight on it. And, it made me wonder, what's to be gained by all of this, Jeff? What is Rutherford's role in all of this? Like, he's the veteran, seasoned NHL executive who you hire, to fix these sorts of situations before they become public spectacles. And this from our friends at Canucks Army and David Quadrelli, the headline, Canucks management happy to play the blame game. But what about their role in all of this? Pick up on any of those topics.
I read Quad's column, and I thought it was pointed, it was timely, it was topical, obviously, but ultimately it was fair that how many of these team issues are we talking about if the defense core was better? And this isn't revisionist history. Even with a healthy Quinn Hughes and Filip Hronek, people said there's no way this defense isn't good enough. Tyler Myers and Carson Soucy, with their massive wingspans, they managed to survive in the playoffs last year, but the underlying numbers were awful. Like, they got crushed. They spent every shift in their own zone.
Some of it by design, some of it defensive zone starts, some of it is that we're hanging onto the puck for quality opportunities,
and as
not
Allvin
quality.
points out, that was round 2, right? Like, it was only going to get tougher from there.
Yep.
And so they elected to not just re-sign Tyler Myers, but give him 3 more years. He's going to be 35 here in a month. Derek Forbort. Haven't seen enough of him to know if he's playing well or not, but he is what he is. Very much a veteran, puck-eating, penalty-killing specialist who doesn't have puck skills. They didn't do much to round out their defense. Matt, it is amazing. If you think about this, on December 31st, going into a game in Calgary, given the circumstances, and we're talking about the need for Erik Brannstrom to play more and give them more. Erik Brannstrom was a throw-in in a...
He was on waivers.
Right, but
they had no use for him either upon the trade.
And now we're talking about him, like, where would they be without Erik Brannstrom? And they need more from Erik Brannstrom. What an indictment to the defense core that they had assembled and thought that they would go into the season with.
Yes. And I know they wanted to improve on the wing. And look, even as who are the late signings? Sprong and Lankinen. And of course, as the summer went along, it also became clear they needed to patch the dam in goal because of Thatcher Demko, which I give them a little bit of a pass on because I think that was a difficult situation to pin down. And yet, the argument that you rob from Peter to pay Paul is very fair, robbing from the defense to play the wing. And also the expectation that Tyler Myers could hold up for yet another. You squeezed second pair minutes out of him last year, and I'll give Tyler Myers a lot of credit. He improved from the previous season, and he did a pretty reasonable job there. But looking at the profile of player that Carson Soucy is, and looking at that in conjunction with Tyler Myers, given his age, and thinking you could get through 82 with them as your second pair, I think was a little ambitious, Jeff.
Yeah. And
a miscalculation, as it turns out.
This love affair with, you got to be 6'5" to play on this hockey club, or at least on the blue line.
That is also misguided. Is also misguided.
Fine.
It's preferable.
Every coach has a profile of guy that he likes. I get that.
It's a nice to do. It's not a need to do. And they're treating it like a need to do.
In an era where puck movement and transportation and transition and all those things, and you see what Quinn Hughes does on a nightly basis. You can't clone Quinn. I get that part. But it underscores what he does and what he means to this hockey club by how he defends. He spends all game up ice, right? And then you build the rest of the defense core around guys that are stay-at-home defensemen. And they stay at home far too much, and they've been fishing the puck out of their net far too much as well. So, it's a flawed roster. I get that every team has warts in a salary cap era. It's mitigating the damage to your lineup. But There is plenty to go around, and yeah, you can't stand in the ivory tower and point fingers elsewhere when you are the architect of a very flawed roster.
So to answer all my questions, we answer the how much blame does management take question. To answer my other question, what's gained by leaking? And we'll talk to Patrick Johnston about this because Patrick's the first one who brought this up last week, I want to say. I think they're just out of answers. I think they've gone the public route because no one else can get through to Elias, so let's see if this will work.
I think there's some of that, but it just kind of feels to me like Jim Rutherford wants to keep this locker room on edge a little bit.
Well, and that brings me to the third one. What's Rutherford's role in all this? And Allvin does name check him when he talks about, Jim's history when it comes to trade. If Jim Rutherford doesn't resolve this situation to the benefit of the Vancouver Canucks, then he is redundant and useless in this organization, and it is time for him to go. Allvin has served his apprenticeship. This is a very tricky matter where you may have to trade either a guy with a no-move clause in JT Miller who wants to be here, and Frank Saravelli says it would be a standoff with JT and his agent if they went to him and said they wanted to move him. I think in part because JT looks around and goes, what other room would I be the man in? I've invested so much time in being the man here in Vancouver. If I'm off to the Rangers, if I'm off to another team, then I'm just another frontline player. I don't have full control of the room like he's got here. Or Elias Pettersson, who's $11.6 million. And, of course, you've got to do that before it's no trade protection kicks in. If Jim Rutherford, with all his experience, Hall of Fame executive, right? If he can't resolve this situation to the benefit of the Vancouver Canucks, then he doesn't need to be here. This is why you have a Jim Rutherford. Because you may notice the practice rink hasn't been built. Hasn't been a fucking whisper about the practice rink in some time. So what is Rutherford doing on a day-to-day basis? He wants to keep the dressing room on edge? Great. How is that working out for them, Jeff? So we'll see. Because Dreger told us on Monday, teams are now calling on Miller. They understand what's going on. Leverage is slipping away here if you want to make a move. If you shit the bed for the next month, everybody's going to know where you're at the trade deadline, making it even more difficult to execute a positive trade for the Vancouver Canucks. We were told they were trying to do things in the hours before the trade, before the roster freeze, I should say. Jeff, the big question here, if this needs a resolution, Pettersson, Miller, or the team just needs a resolution to shake things up, do you think it's more likely to happen by the deadline, or do you think they ride it out and make it happen in the summer?
My gut would tell me that they still want to see this roster healthy and together at the same time, and maybe with...
And I can understand
maybe
that.
with some reinforcements with this cap space that they've been accruing. So
like I honestly
don't see them
think
tearing it down. I don't see them wasting this incredible season from Quinn Hughes. And we just talked about Brock Boeser. He's here for now. They want to believe that with a half a season still to come, that both JT Miller and Elias Pettersson can get their acts together and start playing better and performing, and that Thatcher Demko is going to find his groove at some point. So there are still reasons to believe there's a ton of talent in that locker room. A lot of it hasn't been together at the same time, and I think that's the one thing that they want to see. What did they learn ultimately from that playoff run last year? And can they apply those learnings? And then, if Elias Pettersson comes through another playoff and has 1 goal and 2 points, then it is fair to ask some questions about, is he the guy to build this team around?
And Jeff, there's a part of me that wants to believe that if you go out and you add, and I think it has to be 2 defensemen, not just the one, a legitimate top 4, like a no questions top 4 guy, and then a guy who can maybe masquerade or be on your second pair because he's just better than Soucy or Myers. And I realize that is way easier said than done. And it is probably going to mean having to part with a Wielander, a Lekramaki, certainly your first-round pick upcoming. there's part of me that wants to believe if they do that, and now suddenly you're better in your own zone, and more importantly, suddenly the puck is coming up ice quicker because defensemen are skating it out, or it's coming up quicker because these two defensemen are making those tape-to-tape outlet passes and getting a transition game going, which of course has been mostly lacking. I sort of wonder, does that make everything happier with the forwards up front, and does that solve a lot of what ails these Vancouver Canucks? Again, really difficult task. Not sure they're going to be able to pull it off, but I would love to see that too before I start tearing anything down.
Yeah, and that's my sense, that is what they want. Again, 50 wins and 109 points last year. And it was last year, and everything went right last year. I get that. But I don't think you flush that just because it's been a rocky 3 months here to start this season when pretty much every key piece has missed a significant amount of time.
As for the game in Calgary this evening, Kevin Lankinen is going to start. We foreshadowed that yesterday. It does look like it's lining up for Lankinen to start the 2 out of the 3 games this week. They will split the goaltender duties versus Seattle and Nashville in a back-to-back later in the week, and that's just a move you have to make right now. I think Lankinen gives you a better chance to win. Our old friend Andrei Kuzmenko is not going to play. It is just 1 goal in 29 games this year and none in his last 25.
And it's a power play goal in Chicago. He hasn't scored a 5-on-5 goal. It's hard to find a parallel for a guy going to 0.
And look, the Canucks salvaged that situation before it got to situation critical, but I still do wonder, rather than extend him, what you could have got for him when he was playing on $900,000 at the deadline that one year and on his way to, 39 goals that year. Anyways, Dustin Wolf in goal, the young Calder candidate for the Calgary Flames. He has been a superb. I mean, you look at Calgary and where they are right now, and a big reason why is this young goalie, Wolf.
They scored 4 or more goals in their first 3 games of the season, including opening night here when they won 6-5. They have scored more than 3 goals twice in the 33 games since then.
Yeah.
And somehow are right there neck and neck with the Canucks, and a lot of it is both Dan Vladar, but particularly Dustin Wolf, who leads every statistical category for rookie goaltenders in the National Hockey League. I think he is in a year with Macklin Celebrini and Matvei Michkov. I hope that he's getting the
I think he's on the podium right now with those two guys in terms of your Calder finalists.
The other piece here, the Canucks obviously without Hughes and Pettersson, the Flames are one of the best home ice teams in the league. Go figure. Crappy building, demolition coming. It's not the building itself, but for whatever reason, they're comfortable on home ice. They're 12-4-3 at home. That's one of the best home ice records. I know the Canucks have been good on the road, but they have lost their last 3 road games, including the Utah-Vegas right before Christmas and the Minnesota overtime game before that. So this isn't going to be easy. The Flames don't score many goals. The Canucks are going to take the under, I think. But
hey, now,
okay,
cut my grass. Bet 365 coming up.
We'll get there. But I'm expecting. Tocchet's talked about it. Team structure, all that. I think this could be an ugly game to watch.
Tocchet talked the other day about how they have to weather the storm right now on defense. And what he said was forwards need to get pucks deeper. Surprise, surprise. And he described it in this vein, and that's what I love about Tocchet. He explains the game to you. He wants his forwards to get pucks deeper, not as an offensive strategy. You often hear that. Oh, we need good dump-ins, soft dump-ins. But to facilitate changes for the defense and allow them to execute shorter shifts, Jeff. Which, absolutely makes a lot of sense.
Well, especially if
a lot of logic
these
there,
guys are spending more time at their own end defending.
Exactly.
Tired out.
As for Höglander, who his last goal is how many games now?
107 or something. Not quite, but I think it's up to 26 or 7.
Tocchet talked recently about how he's trying to find an identity, that he didn't capitalize on opportunities that were given to him earlier in the season. And, he's carrying the burden of that. He is fighting the puck. But he said he got to make sure he doesn't make the egregious mistake at the wrong time. He said, I'm not giving up on him. He talked about how the San Jose game a week ago Monday was one of his best games, that he came back, helped the defense out, wanted the puck. The regroups were better. Look, missing Pettersson and Hughes, there's a lot of offense that's left this lineup. Boy, if Nils Höglander could step into that void, because we look at this, and Mike, can you bring up that JFresh chance contribution chart? He looked at all the Vancouver Canucks forwards. There it is. If you're watching on YouTube or a visual platform, look where Nils Höglander ranks in terms of chance creation per 60, only better than Arshdeep Bains and Atu Ratu. And let's face it, those are fringe guys right now at the NHL level, young players that have gone up and down. Everybody is ahead of the game there, including all the struggles Dakota Joshua's had in terms of creating chances. And that should be something that is Höglander's calling card, right? A feisty pest in the offensive zone that gets the puck towards the guts of the ice, as Tocchet would say, and sets up some of those short area goals. And we talked about it yesterday, Jeff. Jonathan Lekramacky scores again last night for the Abbotsford Canucks. He is up to 12 goals and 16 points in 19 games in his first full AHL season. And with Pettersson and Hughes out, if you're not getting goals from some of the struggling forwards tonight, wingers tonight, I think you have to look at Lekramacky for Thursday in Seattle.
I don't know if it happens that quickly. I will say this, that they only have 12 healthy forwards right now. Now, we're led to believe that Pettersson, it truly is day-to-day. He might play the Nashville game. Who knows? He's not on this road trip, but he could be ready for Friday. They can get away with going out on the road with 12 healthy forwards when it's Calgary, a day off, and then Seattle. If they had to bring somebody up from Abbotsford, it's there. It's easy. Guy could drive down to Seattle. There's no way in the world that they're going out east, starting on Monday in Montreal, with 12 forwards.
Of course not. No.
And
Can't do that.
Yeah, it feels like it's imminent that Lekramaki's going to get another look here. He's doing what they've asked of him. He's gone down there. He continues to score, hopefully rounding out other portions of his game. But I do think that he would be the next guy. I hope he'd be the next guy to get another look here at the NHL level.
I think so.
And I do wonder, too, like, if Quinn Hughes is going to be out a couple of weeks, and maybe the Canucks are still trying to really pinpoint a time, like, put him on IR at some point. Like, use the roster spot.
Yes, for sure.
So I think that's a road, not LTIR. We're just talking about the 7-day IR, and then it frees up a roster space. And so I would expect some roster manipulation. This management, we talked about all the things that they haven't done particularly well so far this year. I think they have handled the cap remarkably well.
They have.
And so I would expect that they're on top of that at the very least to have enough healthy bodies as they head out on the road for a 5-game Eastern road trip.
Time for today's menu, brought to you by Greta. A fantastic spot for all the games, home and away. Pre-game, post-game, we'll be there for Canucks Army viewing parties. By the way, has Quadrelli gotten you the schedule for the viewing parties,
I keep
Jeff?
hearing about...
Okay, we're going to have to send a terse note to David about the Canucks Army viewing parties.
Do you have
minutes from the arena? No.
Oh, okay. I thought.
Do I have it? No, of course not.
Well, I thought maybe you were holding out on
No.
Okay. No, I hear
when Quadrelli communicates, he communicates at large. Like, there are big emails sent.
I know that
with
there are
everybody
emails in the company
CC'd.
that aren't like to everybody. There are pockets sometimes. So I thought maybe you were in on something.
No,
okay.
No, certainly not. Your minutes from the arena there at Greta. Check out the great street food menu. The smash burger is outstanding. The arcade.
I've heard we're doing a rink-wide live from...
See, and that's something I want to attend, but where's Quadrelli with the email?
Don't know.
Weekly drink specials at Greta, the place to be, 50 West Cordova, Greta Bar. Let the games begin. Patrick Johnston is going to join us here. John Shannon is also going to join us. Tons of hockey talk on the final day here, and Canucks talk on the final day of 2024. Time now for our Bet365 bets of the day. This guy over here is hot. He called the Seattle-Utah game last night. What you got for us today, Jeff?
I'm looking at an anytime point for Jake DeBrusk. Seems like a pretty simple and fair ask. He's been hot. He leads his team in goals. He scored the other day against Seattle. An anytime point from the Canucks' leading goal scorer. Paying out at $1.90. So
plus 190 for anytime point. That's pretty good. Well, you've previewed my pick, Canucks Flames, and it's a low total. It's set at 5.5. You'll see some NHL games set at 6.5. I usually go over when it's set at 5.5. But the Canucks lacking so much firepower with Hughes and Pettersson missing, Roenick too. I would think a wake-up call to defensive detail after the collapse against Seattle. Plus that fine young netminder, Wolf, in the Calgary cage. So I'm going under 5.5 goals. I'm taking your advice that it's going to be an uglier game here. And, of course, you're going to want to check out Rink-Wide Vancouver.
No matter how ugly the game is. Rink-Wide
You've had a few beers and you just want to vent. Join Jeff today. If they lose and if they win, hey, it's a happy New Year.
There you go.
That chat is going to be special.
Oh, it is going to be special, Mike. Well said.
It always is.
Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION when opening that account. Patrick Johnston coming up next.
I'll be honest, I don't get to many games anymore, whether it be at the arena or the stadium. Ticket availability cost, it's a bit of an issue these days. So I prefer to go where there's atmosphere, and I know I can get in. Greta Bar YVR. Soak up all the atmosphere with your fellow fans and enjoy a great night with a great street food menu. I prefer the poutine. Weekly drink specials as well at Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova. And we'll be having our viewing parties there all season long as well. Your pregame, your postgame, it's at Greta Bar YVR, 50 West Cordova. Let the games begin.
Harrison Price from the historic Wall Center. Patrick Johnston covers the Canucks for the Province and Post Media, and you're laughing already. Happy New Year. So funny.
Hello.
Would you like to share with the class, please?
Just thinking about everything we were talking about before we showed up here.
Do you think Patrik Allvin was trying to send a message yesterday, Peach?
Last week when I talked to him, it is very clear. Yes, I mean this is what I asked Patrik Allvin, or when was it? 10 days ago?
Yeah,
I can't even remember. Time stands still. But yes, I literally put to him. I said, will you need to make a trade? And he said, and essentially the same thing he said yesterday was, if I may have to.
Do you think anyone in this organization is going to be able to reach Elias Pettersson between now and the deadline, or now and this summer?
I don't know. I mean, he's a different cat, and I think we know that. And if they haven't figured that out by now, he is what he is, and certainly, Allvin, I would say the one thing that's changed is Allvin has now spelled it out. He said there is a preparation issue and a focus issue and all this, or blah, 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 right? And which goes back to, the very day he almost
and a maturity issue, too, right?
Maturity. Yeah, and these are all messages that from almost day one, talking about what the sort of mentality here is, what else is possible, what else can you do? And obviously Quinn Hughes heeded that message, and I think to a degree Brock Boeser heeded that message. And clearly, the frustration level is there with Pettersson, and that's certainly something I've been hearing for a while now. Now they're actually saying it out loud. That your talent took you a long way, and I've said this. I know I've said this before here. Your talent took you a long way. Now it can take you further, but you need to do other things to prime yourself better, to prepare yourself better. And whether that's a message that the player himself is buying or taking, I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, we're going to have to wait a few games at least to find out, though. He's not around right now, and neither is Quinn Hughes. Look, when JT was on his leave of absence, Elias Pettersson did show some spark and actually played his best hockey. And I'm not trying to get this back to pitting the two of them together, but now Pettersson's out. It's been a little too quiet around JT Miller.
Oh.
With both Quinn and Petey out of the lineup right here, right now, do you look at Miller and say, it's go time?
Well, I was talking to someone about this the other day. Did we actually see him do anything? Is he doing anything? I mean, against Seattle, he made a couple nice passes. But there's none of those sort of taking the bull by the horns, dominating shifts the way we've seen him. The guy picking up the puck at his own end of the ice and carrying it up and making the zone entry happen. We've just have not seen that. And certainly not in the power. I mean, I think what's most astonishing for me, Jeff, is what we've not seen on the power play, right? We haven't seen him really load up. I mean, maybe they're not trying for it, but we haven't seen him really load up for that shot off the wing that he likes to do when he comes running in down the left. They are trying a few different orientations, but on the whole, there's usually some kind of effort from him to get off a big shot on the power play, and we haven't seen that. And absolutely, the time is now. If ever there was a time for him to get out of a funk, was it October 26th? I know that's your stat, but October 26th.
Oh, the last time he scored on a goalie, yeah.
Last time he scored on a goalie. Yes, he missed a bunch of games, but that's still a long time. Like, that's even if you take the 10 games away, that's more than a month. Like, that's not good.
No, in real time, it's 9 games without a goal. There have been some points along the way, but so let's just bring this back to Pettersson then for a sec, because we won't know ultimately the impact that it's going to have on him. But JT challenged him. There was that little clash they had at practice. Rick talking at the podium, Petey, kind of, and talked about how Edmonton's got these guys that break games, and the Canucks don't. And now Patrik Allvin, like, it's climbing the chain here. Like, and so to Matt's point, like, do we expect that this is going to have any on ice impact for this player?
I mean, I think they're at the end of the rope. I think the way the discussion is not happening now that you're broadcasting to the agents in public, to the fans in public,
to potential suitors in public as well.
Well, that's the part about it that I think. I mean, perhaps it's an impossible situation, but I think a lot about that you are talking publicly about your frustration with the player. You go to another team, say, "Hey, are you interested?" And they're, "Well, if he's a player that you're talking about in public, what are we getting here?" And that's not ideal. It is a difficult spot they've put themselves in. I have no doubt that their preference is to have the player performing, starring for them. The preference is clearly, I don't think, to trade the player. They want him to perform. They're paying. They signed him to the contract. They kept him last year. They signed him to a long-term deal, which is filled with a no movement clause. Yes, it's not on right now, but they made the commitment to saying, we want this player here. They would rather him to become the player they want him to be. So will it make a difference? I don't know. At this point, given everything, I don't know. But they certainly believe this is their last. This seems like the last effort to make that happen.
Patrick, if we get back into our time machine to November 17th, some of us were regaling at the Grey Cup. You guys were next door covering the Canucks loss to the then lowly Nashville Predators, and JT Miller got his benching in the third period, which immediately preceded, I'm sure it wasn't coincidental, the 10-game leave of absence. In retrospect, because that was a public shaming of JT, and as we know, he's a really proud guy, right? Like, really, to have to face the media after being benched, I can't imagine there's a worse day in JT's world.
Yeah.
Pettersson was never sort of publicly benched and shamed in the same way. You think if Tocchet plays that card, we've quelled some of this storm?
Possibly. I'm not sure it's that simple. We've seen, certainly I've experienced some frustration with Miller, in terms of, not directly to me, but I think there's been times when he's been frustrated. I mean, he, especially last season, was so good with us, right? Like, generally available to talk, generally ready to answer. And there were times when Pettersson didn't. And some of that was about how the sort of media request game now works. But he was carrying a lot of the load, and in terms of facing the music. And, Pettersson, I would say his record has been uneven on that. So if you're JT Miller and you're doing all these things, you see what he's not doing, or he's certainly not, at least his perception might not be that he's carrying the load. That can extend to the play. I mean, we know that the way Miller deals with his emotions obviously is the complete opposite end of the spectrum from Pettersson. We know that has been a frustration. I mean, certainly that's in many ways, I think, guiding what's frustrating management is how Pettersson sort of. I mean, he's a, I don't know if introvert's the word, but he's at the quieter end of the spectrum. He takes things into himself. He doesn't express them. And so the idea of benching him to say, listen, we aren't happy with how you're playing. I mean, there's a reason why Tocchet has gone that route with Miller, because he knows that Miller, or at least he believes Miller, will respond. Will Pettersson respond? I think, to me, I am perhaps surprised now that we think about it that it hasn't happened. Now we look at sort of how he, in many ways, shut down last year after he sort of encountered his own frustrations, right? Like, he wasn't playing very well. Mentally, I don't think he had the coping skills to deal with the sort of lack of confidence he felt in his own game. That we certainly heard that kind of frustration. When we think back, Tocchet talked a lot about the sort of the performance, mental performance skills aspect of it all, and as Pettersson was struggling last season, suggesting maybe there's something he can do to quite literally perhaps give his head a shake. So the approach has been different. Would a benching make an impact? I don't know, but you're right. In hindsight, it's surprising perhaps that they haven't tried that.
Yeah, and just before anybody, because oftentimes fans get this confused and try to equate it to youth sports and things like that. Pro coaches will tell you their job is to find the ways to motivate the individual. So oftentimes what's good for the goose isn't good for the gander. And so it can seem inequitable, but that is by design. That is the head coach saying, I understand this guy's personality. I understand this guy's makeup. And if I push this button, it works better for him than if I push that button with the other guy. What do you think, Jeff, on the same?
Look, I would imagine every guy on that roster was pretty damn frustrated with PD in the playoffs last year.
Yeah.
Like, for them to do what they did and get to Game 7 and get within a goal with zero production, essentially. And so, obviously, you had to keep playing him last year. You weren't going to sit him or discipline him at that point. But then the hope, obviously, was that he would take this offseason, figure things out. And when he came back and the first 15 games looked so much like they did down the stretch, I could understand if I was a teammate and there was sort of no punitive action in any way against this guy. And it just kind of does feel like, they were remarkably patient with him, thinking that at some point it was all going to come together. And here we are ready to flip the calendar to 2025, and it really hasn't yet come together this season.
Especially when he's defiant in the media, right? Like he doesn't want to take it on, especially when he makes comments like he was competitive on the salary with William Nylander. It's like these are the sorts of things that don't necessarily land with the group writ large. So
I just quickly looked up and I found it. I remember there was an exchange in the playoffs. Jeff, actually, it's funny you mentioned that, but I found it. That we basically Rick Tocchet it was May 15th. Rick Tocchet calling out Pettersson saying, "Be more dynamic, and can you be better?" And Pettersson basically saying, "Yeah, I know I haven't been playing well." He says, "It's challenged me, but I always like challenging. I always like to think I can answer them." He also said he was trying. I'm trying out there. Maybe not going the best way, but I want to be a difference maker. But then we asked him, I do remember this, we asked him, why haven't you been able to make it happen? And he simply said, good question.
Yeah.
Right, and how many times have we heard Rick Tocchet say, he's got to move his feet, which obviously is code speak for he's just not playing well enough and we need more from this guy. Yes. So he gets he's got to move his feet, and JT gets basically the public shaming with 18,000 people looking on.
The one thing that I think we can absolutely put to bed after this week and these comments from Allvin, in conjunction with what he told you last week, Patrick, is that Elias is not, in fact, his worst critic. That is now just pablum. That is now just a line to try and make all of this go away. There is no there. Because the criticism has come in far greater measure now from people around him. And fellas, I continue to wonder if Tocchet not dismissing it as tendinitis. You say he shut down when things weren't going well for him last year, Peach. I still wonder if, Tocchet saying, no, he's not injured, guys, and then Elias detailing that knee injury in the postmortem and Tocchet dismissing it as tendinitis. I just sort of wonder if that was the straw that broke the camel's back, that he completely shut down for this organization after feeling he wasn't supported on an injury matter publicly by his head coach.
That may be possible. All I can tell you right now is that he is not injured. I have asked a couple of people, and they're like, nope, this is a healthy player. So...
Hold on. You're saying he's healthy right now? Like he didn't play the game?
Sorry. Sorry.
Okay.
Until the injury. Sorry,
Whoa.
to be clear.
I thought we had a bombshell there, J-Pad.
Sorry. Until the injury,
he
has been healthy. This season, he has been healthy until the injury.
Yeah. But Jeff said yesterday he felt this was a accumulation of things building up with Elias that have led to this week or so that he's going to miss, whatever the case may be. Those injuries are real, as you understand.
Yes. What he is currently undergoing, I'm not disputing anything that exists currently or what Jeff has said. I was saying until essentially this all happened, he'd been fine. He'd been healthy this year. There had been no.
There's enough going on around this team.
Exactly. I thought, what a hell of a day to ring in the new year and send out 2024. Are you done talking about Pettersson with him? Because I would. Okay. Because lest we escape what I thought was a pretty interesting comment on Brock Boeser from the general manager.
Yeah.
And of course, I will bring you back to the summer where Patrik Allvin said, well, 40 goals, but he took his foot off the gas, thought he could have got to 50. And then yesterday he says, but I would have him in the same boat as Petey and Miller in terms of giving us more when we need more. There is more to give. Absolutely. Are we seeing Brock Boeser's last year in Vancouver? Do you think either by the deadline or just play it out and take the cap space in the summer is how they're approaching Boeser's future here?
I mean, I've wondered about this since the summer. He has been an excellent player. I think he has generally been very good for this team. I think he's been, he obviously played the best hockey of his career last year. Came through a lot to get there. And, but this summer, sitting there thinking about how do you do this? What are you facing? Even with a cap that's going up, Brock Boeser remains a right winger, right? If you are making choices on where you should be spending your money, well, the Canucks did make a choice last year by extending Elias Pettersson, who was not a surprise. Previously extending JT Miller, they if you want to use the soccer term, they focused on securing the spine of their team, right? That's where you spend your money. Wingers, Boeser is a top flight goal scorer. He has proved that. He is better as a two-way player, I think, than he gets credit for, but that is not what he's known for. This is not a Sam Reinhart type winger. So I remember I thought of it in the summer. I said, man, if push comes to shove, is he getting extended? I think I'm going with no, and I think that's still my position. I think for the sake of the sort of soul of the Canucks and the culture of the Canucks, as a guy that I think is going to be a long-standing, well-remembered Vancouver Canuck for everything that he's meant to this team. You do want to see him go on, but if you are being cutthroat and you're saying what is the future of this team, there was a reason why they took a look at Jonathan Lekkerimäki earlier this season. They want to know what the potential options may be in front of them and how soon those may arrive. And it may come sooner than expected. Lekkerimäki's got 12 goals in the minors now. Like he's improving. I'm not saying he's an immediate replacement for Brock Boeser, but there is the possibility in the future that's the option they have to take. Yeah. So listen. I mean, Jim Rutherford was very clear on After Hours when he was asked, and he said there are two different numbers here. They have a clear position, and I don't expect they're going to waver from it very much. And so if you want to stay here, you are going to take that, and they're going to lean on that because they know how much Brock Boeser likes living here and likes being here. But you're right, Matt. That's a big cap hole that they could use on something else.
Hey, Pat, forget the broader view of a replacement for Brock Boeser. How about getting Lekkerimäki back here in the here and now? Nils Höglander's gone forever without a goal. Dakota Joshua, it's coming along way slower, I think, than anybody had hoped or thought with him. They'll get Pettersson back in short order. It doesn't sound like it's going to be more than a handful of games, but do you bring Lekkerimäki back for another look here to try to produce some offense in the absence of Pettersson in the short term, but longer Quinn Hughes as well?
I mean, I think you said it. I mean, Höglander has been such a disappointment. Think about that missed chance he had on was it Saturday? As again, everything's blending into one.
I know.
But think about that sitter. Like, he was in front of the net. He just had to get it over the goalie. Like, he gets it over Grubauer, and that's a goal. And he whiffed. And that has been the theme of his season. I think he has been playing better lately, but playing better and scoring goals are two very different things. And similar to Elias Pettersson, they just need those. I mean, Pettersson has been, he did bury some goals, and that's good. Höglander hasn't even done that. So yeah, I think there is a case to be made that you want to see what Jonathan Lekkerimäki has and how much closer he is to being a full-time NHLer. He needs to add some strength. I mean, we saw that, right? Like that he's a slight player. He's needs to find a way not to get ragdolled. He got ragdolled at times. Certainly has the hands. We know that he's got the instincts to score. He's got the hands to score. That right now is the difference. Brock Boeser is a strong, stout man who goes to the spots where he knows the goals are going to be, and he buries them. And Jonathan Lekkerimaki, I think, is still, to a degree, going to struggle to do that. But is he closer? We're a couple months down the line from when he was here in the NHL. So, he's still a growing boy, as they say.
Yep. Yep. All right, sir. Last bit of business is the poll question, the Surrey Mitsubishi poll question. Do you think Canucks management would choose Miller over Pettersson if it comes to that?
My impression is they would like to go the other way if they had to make a choice. But one of them is tradable right now, and one of them is a lot. You could trade either. I think at the end of the day, I think the choice is that they would like, if they have to make a trade, they're sticking with Pettersson. So I'm saying no. I think my answer to my question is no. I have to stick with that, even though it feels more likely. I feel like there's Matt, you're going to like this one. I've been thinking about this. I think Patrik Allvin is trying to shift the Overton window here on what they want to do publicly with Elias Pettersson, building themselves some sort of people getting. Oh yeah, they had no choice to do this. I do find myself wondering a little bit about that, about the rudder that's going on right now. Certainly, the fact that he started with me and I said, I asked the question, do you need to make a trade? Just blank. I didn't put names on it. Mm-hmm. Name was put on it yesterday, and he said, yeah, maybe. So, it's certainly, I think what he's saying is he's not, he is priming the pump to make a trade. I think that much is clear. Whether it's a room-shifting trade, I still don't know. But it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility. But if they have to make a choice, are they picking Miller over Pettersson? I think the answer would be no.
You have a happy, and a merry. Thank you for all your contributions here and with Rinkwide and Jeff over 2024. Look forward to catching up in 2025.
It's always a thrill to be here, guys.
Thanks, PJ.
Next time, don't be late.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
So, Harrison Price from the Historic Wall Center. This next segment brought to you by Ben Moss. Ben Moss, proudly Canadian-owned, operated, history dating back more than a century. You got 5 locations here in BC: Abbotsford, Victoria, Chilliwack, Willowbrook, and Langley. And, of course, Coquitlam Center, committed to customer satisfaction. Check out the large selection of Canadian mine diamonds, lab-grown diamonds. They got diamonds with payment plans to suit your needs. For more information, check out benmoss.com. Ben Moss, shine bright. And our next guest, the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada. His new show, 100% Hockey with Darren Millard, starts on Friday. A happy new year to the most famous man from Oliver, British Columbia, Mr. John Shannon. Happy holidays, John. How was your Christmas?
Oh, it was great. We go on Shannon lockdown. So, we don't do a darn thing for 5 days. So it's great. Really
you sit in the house, you watch hockey, you watch football, you eat, you drink, you be merry.
Yeah. And, you don't even get in the car. You don't even get in the car. It's fantastic.
And honestly, that's part of the allure, right? There is nothing to do. There is nothing on the schedule. There is nothing where my attendance is required.
And quite frankly, I don't get tuned into the World Junior Championship. My friend Paul Graham will be angry with me until tonight. With the big Canada-USA game, the preliminary round is what it is, and you have wins and you have losses. Just make sure you qualify for the next round, and now the serious stuff starts. So, and then the rivalry between the two countries is something that has really grown, and it's fun to watch.
So you're not striking the symposium after the loss to Latvia.
Well, no, but the Americans then should do it too after their loss to Finland. So, it's all relative, right? It's all relative.
Yeah. Looking forward to tonight. Also, looking forward to the second half of the NHL season. We will start with Patrik Allvin's comments yesterday, John, on Elias Pettersson and beyond. What struck you?
Well, I think the messaging from management has been pretty consistent. I think that they started the season with a great deal of hope and then grew a little more disappointed day after day when it appeared that lots of players, not just Elias, didn't really learn from their 2 rounds of playoff performance. And because it all goes back to, well, wait until the team gets some playoff experience. Wait until they get a playoff experience. And some teams can make it work. And right now, the Vancouver Canucks have not done a very good job of translating that experience in those games against Nashville and against Edmonton into success this regular season. And I think that's very frustrating for management.
Would you be wary of Elias Pettersson's future here after reading what the GM had to say?
I am still not. This guy's a superstar, or has the potential to be a superstar. He may not be right now. He's a foundational part. I think that's one of the reasons why at such a young age, Pettersson is getting a lot of this criticism, because I think they feel they need to push him to get to that level, and they need to condition him to criticism and condition him to playing under the microscope. And so from that point, I would say no. They're still trying to get him to play the right way. But the fear that you'd have of getting rid of somebody with that talent to come back to haunt you would I think would be paramount for this group.
You talk about applying the lessons that they learned from the playoffs. They may not get the chance to apply those lessons in next spring's playoffs, John, unless they pick things up. And it just feels like crunch time. Obviously, no Pettersson for this week, but the bigger issue, obviously, is Quinn Hughes out for a couple of weeks. We're led to believe here. If they lose in regulation to Calgary tonight, the Flames leapfrog them and the Canucks fall below the playoff bar. Like, how concerned do you think this group should be about the tenuous situation without 2 of the best players right now?
I think you should add Philip Hronek to that too, Jeff.
Yep,
I really do. And there is no coincidence that this team has sputtered without Hronek in the lineup too. I think he's a big factor both on the ice and in the room. So I'm a little more conservative than most people on this discussion. I'll explain my logic before I give it. So when I was running Hockey Night, we would never, ever show the standings until the All-Star break. It just wasn't pertinent. It didn't matter. Now, really what happened was that guys of influence started to mention the U.S. Thanksgiving and all this stuff, and so that became something. But I just think it's too early to panic. I still do think it's too early to say, well, they're going to leapfrog them and now they're in a playoff spot. Where was it, game 37, 38? Yeah. I mean, so I just think it's far too early to be sitting here saying, okay, this is a vital game. They have finally got to some extent their home game a little bit better. Their road game has been fine. So ask me after maybe at the end of January. I still think that yes, it's a work in progress. I am not worried about it. I am not. This team is talented enough. It's deep enough. Thatcher Demko is basically right now at the end of training camp. That's really where he is. And the other day against Seattle, you could see that it was, so there were some brilliant saves, and then there was stuff that, hey, okay, you got to get your act together, in that sense. So I am not worried just yet about the Vancouver Canucks at a playoff spot. To me, they're if they're not third in the Pacific, then they're certainly a wild card team for me.
You referenced Saturday afternoon against Seattle. No. Breathtaking stuff.
I've never seen anything like that. And I can't remember anything like that as drastic as that from the 15-minute mark on. I can't.
Yeah. We were watching I was at least watching the Kraken intermission show, and after 2 periods, boy, the commentary was quite different.
Why, hold on.
happens.
Why are you watching the Kraken show?
Because I could. Because I stumbled upon it and I went, oh, look at that. Oh, yeah, that's right. The Kraken are on local Seattle
Oh, that's right.
television.
Okay, yes.
So I just, it's just different. We get a lot of the Sportsnet crew here, and that's fine. But I watched the Prime game last week, which I really liked. You and I were texting about that.
Yep.
And then I was like, you know what? Forsland, Olczyk, DT was there, plus their intermission panel, post-game. Linda Cohen was there, for heaven's sakes, the legend herself. So, yeah. Anyways, Hughes, Dreger tells us it should be about 3 weeks on Quinn Hughes, so about 10 games. What are your thoughts about playing without Quinn for about 10 games?
Well, that's a ton of pressure to put on guys like Susie and Myers and a few, and Noah Jolson has to be better. He has to be better. That's part of what this learning curve is going to be all about. You do almost think, though, that how does the game plan change? Because Quinn does so many things, not just on the power play, not just the way he navigates the offensive blue line, but how they transition out of their own zone is so much of what Quinn Hughes does. You do have to think that has to be, between now and his return, there has to be some level of simplification of zone exits, puck control, and 5-on-5 play in your own zone. That to me is just that. I'm sure that Adam Foote I'm sure he's lost some sleep over this one without having Quinn Hughes in the lineup.
They might be able to get by here this week. It's Calgary, it's Seattle again, it's Nashville, and then it's Montreal to start a road trip. But a week from now, John, it's Washington, it's Carolina, it's Toronto, and it's Winnipeg. So Mountain gets pretty steep in a real hurry here for this hockey club for a lot of those areas that you just talked about. I think that's the challenge. That you can say, hey, Noah Jolson's got to be better. Can he be better? And can he be better against the best teams in the National Hockey League? And I guess we're about to find out.
Well, hey, listen. I think you learned a lesson from the Seattle game on Saturday, Jeff.
So.
There's no empty net goals in this league anymore. Montreal goes into Florida and wins 4-0. Nashville played really well last night in Winnipeg. Nashville's a better team than they show right now. And Barry Trotz is going to be very patient. There's not going to be a house cleaning in Nashville. They're going to push this through with this group of guys. So from that perspective, I know the 4 games against the big squad, starting with Washington, are hard, but I tell you what, these 4 games against these teams are going to be fascinating. Calgary for the first part of the year. I think we talked about it. Was one of the best stories in hockey, and they every once in a while they kind of hit the skids. But you know what? They're going to be a tough out tonight at home. But nobody's easy anymore. Anaheim's not easy. San Jose's not easy. Yeah. This is a very difficult league right now for all 32 teams.
And like to see it because the floor needed to raise after the last few years, John, and it has. So that's fantastic.
It does make you wonder what the magic number. Our pal Kenny Holland, who's sitting in Vernon, at the lake, just having a good time right now. He was the guy that you'd say, okay, Kenny, what's the magic number? He'd say 96. It'd be 96 points to make the playoffs. Okay, 96, and so you'd measure everything against 96. I'm not sure it's going to be 92. This year, just because that, as you talked about, Matt, the floor has risen so much, and there are really no pathetic teams in the NHL right now, and conversely, there is no overly dominant team in the NHL. We used to talk about the 8 teams or 9 teams in the mushy middle. We might have 16 or 17 in the mushy middle now.
Yeah. John, yesterday we asked, is this Canucks season cursed? Now, you're an old British Columbian. young boy when the Vancouver Canucks struck their NHL franchise and the
Yes, sir.
draft wheel dropped on Vancouver.
Patterson was
Oh,
in
wait a
Kamloops.
second. No,
Patterson
it's
was in
Buffalo.
Kamloops at that point, was he? Were you in Kamloops at that time, Jeff? Were you up there?
When the Canucks came into the league,
Yeah.
I was in diapers. Come on.
I'd like to tell you I was too, but I wasn't. So.
So, no, but you go back to the draft wheel and, Perot going to Buffalo and Talon.
I go back to 67 when Vancouver got screwed. That's how far I go back. Because Vancouver should have had an original team in 67, but the Maple Leafs and Canadians voted against it because they didn't want to share the TV money.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think? The notion that this franchise is just cursed, that they are the NHL's version of what the Red Sox and the Cubs used to be.
Hold on. Buffalo has missed the playoffs for 13 seasons. The Detroit Red Wings are 8 years out. There are a lot of cursed teams in this league. As a British Columbian, can you see people being frustrated with 2 steps forward, 3 steps back? Sure, you can see that and you can feel that. This is still a very good team. What really has changed for me, and it's something that it's recent history, is since the arrival of Jim Rutherford and Patrik Allvin, is the expectation has changed. The expectation, and remember, before they showed up, it was, oh God, we just want a playoff game. Oh, we gotta have a playoff game. Well, now it's not the expectation of get into the playoffs. Now it's, oh, we got to get to the third round, or are we? Do we have championship caliber players on this club? So really, in so many ways, the tide has risen so high because of the foundation that these guys have set. Dare I remind everybody that of the time, and Jeff, you were traveling with the club when Bruce Boudreau was the best news in town. It wasn't that long ago, and they didn't make the playoffs with Bruce. It wasn't that long ago. So it to me, it's based on, and really the team that I would compare the Canucks to, not as drastic as the team I'm going to tell you about, is the New York Rangers. There was expectation. If somebody had told me in September that it could be a Vancouver Rangers Stanley Cup final, I would have bought it.
There was a lot of that. Redux of 94. It's going to be the Rangers and the Canucks in September. Yeah.
So I understand the passion. I understand the frustration. But I think you have to think it's all based on the expectation that the fan base and the team has created because they have rebuilt the foundation so well.
Probably not what your buddy Sam Rosen imagined when he announced his retirement tour.
No, I don't know what's going on there. And I don't know if you noticed the news day before yesterday, but Jim Dolan's father passed away. The legendary Charles Dolan, the man who invented HBO and really was an advocate for cable TV, kept the New York Islanders alive for years. By buying the TV rights to the hockey club. So you'd have to think that if anything's going to happen, it's not going to be imminent as they try to find a way to manage through what the Dolan family is doing.
Yeah. Allvin said in that story with IMAC yesterday that, sometimes you have to shake things up. Do you think this management group has the patience to watch this through to the end of the year, or do you anticipate, here's the quote, "Do I want to see if I could shake things up and send a message to the players? Sometimes that is what's needed." Do you see that happening by the trade deadline?
Well, first thing is, I think for Patrick to tell Ian that is the first level of shakeup, is that, wave the big stick. And do it publicly, because darn well they've done it privately. They've had talks with the players and talks with the coaches and say, what are we doing? We got to do it better. But they will not sit down and just live through this. If by, March 7th? If by March 7th that they're still, and I've used the word already, sputtering, then something will happen. They will do something. Jim Rutherford and Patrik Allvin, if you look at their history and they think they have potential, they will sell the farm for now. They will get it done in order to try, particularly if they believe in this group of players. And when you talk about Quinn Hughes, if he's healthy, and when you talk about Pettersson and you talk about Miller, and the other players and Thatcher, and they're invested in, they will do something before the deadline in order to try to right the ship.
Do you believe they would choose Miller over Pettersson if it gets that drastic?
I'm still of the belief they're not choosing either, so that they're sticking with both of them. I really am.
Sticking to his guns. You've been consistent on this.
You guys both know that I've been a Miller advocate for a long time. I just love the way he shows his emotion, and I love the way he plays the game. But at the same time, Pettersson is an elite of an elite player, and they can. There has to be a belief that they can fix that.
So you don't believe that the end is nigh here. That if the turnaround doesn't come between now and the deadline, that they're going to
that would be as much as I think that this management group likes the here and now. I just think they would look at it and say, this guy's too young. He does have potential. And he's going to come back and bite us in the butt if we do something silly.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, Happy New Year, Mr. Shannon.
Wait, yes. I need to know, John. Help me out here. This league has spent, I don't know how many years now, better part of 2 decades, it feels like, building up the tradition of the Winter Classic on New Year's Day. And here we are. We're not flipping the calendar, and they're playing at Wrigley this afternoon. Is this the league spooked by college football and the big day on Jan 1 this year, or why are they playing the Winter Classic on December 31st?
Well, Jeff, I was there. I was at the league in 2008, 2009 when this whole Winter Classic came about, and we picked January 1st because NBC dropped the Gator Bowl, and so the quotes were, if college football and it doesn't want New Year's Day, we do. To me, the difference between December 31st and New Year's Day is moot, really. The question becomes how many more people will watch on December 31st versus January 1st, and I think the answer is I think more people will watch today, simply because with the new college football playoffs system and tomorrow being a huge day, I think this makes more sense. I also think that the guys that do the schedule and the network. And TNT they also look at the success that the World Juniors had in our country, particularly on December 31st. And so if you look now, that's a pretty darn good doubleheader with the outdoor game and then Canada USA back to back. So it's not ideal. I do think that part of the answer to your question, Jeff, is that I think that people envision a greater success for the outdoor game, that it would be a tent pole that people who aren't necessarily traditional hockey fans would watch, and that's just not the case. This is still
it was saturated, John. They started doing outdoor games left, right, and center, so it lost sort of its special event status. The Winter Classic,
but they tried to change that the last couple of years. They went and then they added. Last year, Vegas and Seattle was, quite frankly, such a disappointment. But it speaks to the success of this league is its regionality. The success of this league is what it does in the markets. Like if you compare, if you compare almost every NBA team regionally versus NHL regionally, the hockey team wins 60 to 70% of the time.
It's fair share. You're quite right.
But nationally, it doesn't. Correct. And that in the United States. And that's the real frustration. It was a frustration for all of us, and it was a frustration, I'm sure, for the guys. So I'm willing to try. This has become, the outdoor game now has become a super regional event. That's what it's become.
Absolutely. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's big in Chicago today. Hopefully it's big in St. Louis today. and then we'll figure out where next year is.
Yeah.
And if it's in South Florida, it's in South Florida.
And for those who don't know, as college football slowly moved towards the playoff, you started to see fewer games on New Year's Day and fewer games of consequence on New Year's Day. So it was a really smart opportunity from you and others in the league to move into that space. College football has now gone to a 12-team playoff this year. So New Year's Day now has 3 playoff games, elimination games, which is difficult to program against and get an audience.
By the way, just to set the record straight, it was John Collins and Ken Shanzer at NBC were the 2 driving forces. I was just along for the ride.
Okay. Well, we're glad you've been along for the ride with us in 2024, Shannon.
Happy New Year, boys.
Happy New Year. Good luck on the launch of the show on Friday with Darren Millard. We'll be watching. We'll be listening. And we'll catch up next week in 2025.
Cheers, boys. And you know what? Canuck fans, just be patient, okay?
Okay. Let's hope 2025 isn't cursed.
Oh, you don't know what cursed is until you talk about 73 and 74 and 75. That's cursed.
Until you've seen a draft wheel that looks like it says Canucks, but on closer inspection,
there's no way Punch Imlach was losing that wheel, baby.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
Secure some price from the historic Wall Center, where if you got your tickets to the big game, make it a staycation. Book your stay at the Wall Center. Call 604-331-1000. Ask for the Secure some price rate. Some blackout dates apply based on availability. You can text this show, 778-402-9680. Email live at securesomeprice.com. It all goes to the Great Clips inbox. Great Clips.
It's going to be great.
Yeah. He's right. He was all over that. Yesterday, too.
Waiting. Yeah.
Okay, so World Junior Hockey Championships from our nation's capital. Here are the stakes for Canada as they take on the United States in the big New Year's Eve showdown. First of all, Canucks prospect Sawyer Minio skating on the 3rd pair with Caden Price. A little disappointed that he didn't get into the first couple of games and has seemed to be the 6th or 7th defenseman for Canada. But he'll play. He'll play tonight, and he'll play the rest of the way with Matthew Schaefer injured. The winner of this game wins Group A, becomes the number 1 seed in the knockout round. If the game goes to overtime, Canada will finish no lower than 2nd place in the group. If Finland-Latvia, which is ongoing, goes to overtime, Canada will finish no lower than 2nd place. But if Canada loses in regulation, and either the Finns or Latvians win in regulation, Jeff, Canada would be 3rd place. And they would play the loser of the Sweden-Czech Republic match, and that's the big undefeated showdown on the other side of the bracket, in the quarterfinals, which would be a very tough draw in the quarterfinals to face the Swedes or the Czechs. Winter Classic today from Wrigley. We talked about it with John Shannon. I caught a story from Mark Lazarus of The Athletic out of Chicago, suggesting locations for the next Winter Classic or future Winter Classics. Jeff, our fair city makes his list. Did you see this?
I did.
Stanley Park and the Brockton Oval. And he qualifies by saying, look, there's a lot of red tape. Who knows how many seats you could get there. But sitting there on the waterfront in Vancouver, in a park named for the same person that the Stanley Cup is named for. That is former Governor General Lord Frederick Stanley. We had always talked about Whistler. What do you think? Park Sport, if there is a Park Sport, would they green light? Could you see Mayor Sim or anyone in the city going, let's do a Winter Classic at Stanley Park?
I'd like to think they'd be on board. I don't know if the fan base, I guess they would be. And we talked with John. Like, it's become a regional thing.
Yeah.
It'll be a big deal in Chicago. They'll have fun with it.
Of course. Wrigley's an awesome place to be.
Last place Blackhawks against the very definition of the middle of the pack Blues.
Mediocre.
The matchup leaves something to be desired here. I do think, like, and I kind of go back and forth on this one a little bit about like how's this version of the Canucks not been involved and been raised to a league level game with the star power, the Norris Trophy winner,
Right.
the 5 All-Stars, the Coach of the Year.
Right.
Is it an outdoor game? Is it one of the global series and taking the show overseas? I just think if this league wants star power, it's hard to find much more star power than Quinn Hughes these days.
Winter Classic, you're not going to get a Canadian team unless it's Toronto and maybe Montreal if they ever got back to province.
Right, but Heritage.
Maybe Connor McDavid. It's very much an American thing. Outdoor Stadium Series game is a little bit different. You get more Canadian teams involved. Yeah, I think Global Series, I think you're barking up the right tree there.
Yeah, except that the one key piece of that puzzle.
You sort of need
needs
the big Swedish star if you're
Yeah.
going to go to Sweden. Mm-hmm. We'll see about that. Congratulations to Nanaimo's Ethan Katzberg. The gold medalist in the hammer throw at the Paris Olympics has been named the Canadian Press Male Athlete of the Year. We talked about it a few weeks ago. The Northern Star Award, formerly the Lou Marsh. There was no competition this year with what Summer McIntosh did in the swimming, but the male vote for CP Athlete of the Year we thought would be pretty interesting. Katzberg got 17 of the 56 votes. It was a very tight race. He edged the 2023 winner, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, the point guard with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Connor McDavid finished third. Gilgeous-Alexander got 14 votes. McDavid got 13. We talked about with Blake a few weeks ago, it was actually a pretty good year for hockey players. I think you could have made a case for McDavid. I think you could have made a case for NHL Hart Trophy winner Nathan McKinnon. I think you could have made a case for West Vancouver Sam Reinhart.
All the goals
with all those
scored,
goals
yeah.
and a Stanley Cup
right?
championship, not to mention Brady Oliveira, the Winnipeg running back, who pulled the double this year for the most outstanding player, most outstanding Canadian player. One of the few Canadian players to win the CFL MOP. So congratulations to Ethan. He was one of 2 individual male gold medalists at the Paris Olympics.
And are we now a country of throwers, right? Like that's
And breakdancers with Phil Wizard. Phil
too,
Kemp.
but
Of course, the men's 4x100 relay won gold. There was a bunch of men's teams
but with
that
Cameron
got
Rogers doing it on the women's side.
Oh, absolutely.
Like
Yeah.
I do wonder if this will produce others that follow.
Throwers
In there. Are they trailblazers? I hope so.
Big Dylan of Kamloops,
Yep.
once upon a time. And I'm mentioning Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, I wanted to get to this note because for years and years we have heard about how basketball is the up-and-coming sport here in Canada. And really, I think you could say there has been several failures to launch here. Anthony Bennett turned out to be a bust, first overall pick. Andrew Wiggins hasn't really lived up to Maple Jordan. RJ Barrett is a fine player, but he didn't go first overall, and hasn't turned into an NBA All-Star or anything like that. And then, of course, the men's national team, where you get excited about them at the World Cup and then not so much at the Olympics. But on Boxing Day, Jeff, and how appropriate that it was a Raptors-Grizzlies game.
Mm-hmm. Now the Grizz decked out in
Vancouver Grizzlies. 6 Canadians played in that game, an NBA record. Kamloops' Kelly Olynyk took the opening tap versus Zach Edey of Mimico, Ontario. And on that night in the NBA, 11 different Canadians scored in double figures. It was the first time that had happened since March 2021. And I'll say this about Gilgeous-Alexander. Oklahoma City is 26-5 this year. They lead the Western Conference by 5 full games over Memphis. And Gilgeous-Alexander is second in league scoring to Giannis. This could absolutely be the year where Gilgeous-Alexander breaks through for Canadian basketball, either with an MVP or with an NBA championship or with both. He is that special of a player. Surrey Mitsubishi poll question results from Monday. We asked you, is this Canucks season cursed? Jeff, 69% voted yes.
A little surprised at that.
I was a little surprised too. I thought it would win the poll.
I mean, I get the pain of the fan base. I understand that part, but almost 70%, that surprises me a little.
Terrence, the curse is real ever since the first spin of the wheel and we lost Perot. No nugs given. No under Talkit. This is who we are. Talkit's getting a lot more heat from the fan base, huh?
Yeah.
Honeymoon is over for Rick Talk.
Yeah, 6-month bump for being the coach of the year, and then
And that was it.
off. Yeah.
Uncle Terry, this franchise is cursed. Oh, sorry, Mike. No, last season was just blessed. This is who we are. We've heard a lot of that as well. Everything went right last year. And then Uncle Terry, this franchise is cursed. All of you know it. Some of you are afraid to admit it. Errors and omissions from yesterday's program. I said the Czech roster was replete with St. Louis Blues prospects. It's actually just 3. There are 3 Blues prospects on the Czech team. There are 2 Blues prospects on the Slovak team. There is a league high 9 Blues prospects at the
I think
World Juniors.
Saw on the broadcast on the weekend that Seattle has 8. They're second, but St. Louis with 9. So
that's it. And that's it for us in 2024. And I was thinking, Jeff, this is the 4th calendar year. We're almost celebrating our 4-year anniversary here of taking our shows digital, of taking ownership of our shows here. And boy, we could not have done it with all the incredible support from this community. So to our audience members, our supporters, our followers, our contributors, our partners, a very hearty thank you from us here at Sekeres and Price, Rinkwide with Jeff Paterson, and everybody who is able to do this because you folks are willing to support. So thank you for that, and please do subscribe to all our assorted channels, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow on social, that is X, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Blue Sky. The New Year's party of the year is happening on Rinkwide Vancouver tonight after the game against the Flames. Jeff will be in here doing the show. There's a wedding of 500 people going on outside at the Wall Center, so there's going to be some fun had tonight. More than that, thanks everybody for a fantastic 2024, and keep it local.